welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling something, something a lot of you learning English really grapple with. It's this feeling where you understand quite a bit. Maybe you're following this conversation or movies, reading articles, no problem. But then when it's your turn to speak, it feels like you hit a wall, an invisible one. So we've gathered some really good insights today. We're drawing from sources that look at why this happens and, maybe more importantly, give you some practical techniques, stuff you can use to start speaking more confidently. Our mission really is to hand you a kind of toolkit, effective methods you can start using, like today, to bridge that gap between understanding and actually speaking.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a common experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
You take in all this language, you process it, but actually producing it, speaking it, that feels like a whole different skill set.
It really does.
The knowledge feels like it's in there somewhere, but getting it out smoothly in a real conversation, that's the tricky part.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of, say, learning piano. You can listen to incredible music, understand how it's structured, but that doesn't mean you can just sit down and play it beautifully, right?
That's a perfect analogy.
Speaking needs its own practice, its own coordination.
Exactly. You can think of it as needing to train specific language muscles. It's about building automaticity, getting those mental processes, finding the words, forming the sentences to work together without you having to consciously think about every single step.
Right, like muscle memory for your mouth and brain.
Precisely. And this is key. Confidence is a huge factor here. It really affects how well you can actually use those muscles you've been building.
Okay, so let's talk about one of the biggest roadblocks people mention, this habit of translating in your head, thinking first in your native language, then converting it sentence by sentence into English before you even open your mouth. Why is that such a barrier?
Well, it creates this major bottleneck, cognitively speaking. Imagine trying to follow a conversation, formulate your own thoughts, and run a simultaneous translation service in your head.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
It is. And it dramatically slows down your response time. Plus, as the sources we looked at point out, the English that comes out often sounds, well, a bit unnatural, hesitant.
Because the sentence structures are different, maybe?
Exactly. Word order, idioms, the natural flow. They often just don't line up perfectly between languages, so the translation can sound forced.
Okay, so that's the trap. How do people start getting out of it? What's a first step away from constantly translating?
A really powerful technique, maybe the foundation, is to consciously start thinking in English.
Just think in English.
Well, it sounds simple, maybe, but it takes deliberate effort. Instead of seeing English as this code you need to decipher and then re-encode from your native language, you start trying to use it directly for your internal thoughts.
So internalizing it more.
Exactly. You're trying to bypass that translation step. It reduces the mental load significantly.
Right, okay. That makes sense conceptually.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? You can't just flip a switch in your brain, can you? What are some practical things people can actually do to build that habit?
No, it's definitely not a switch. It's gradual. But there are very practical things. One of the most effective is immersion. Really try to create an English environment around yourself.
Yeah.
Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
You mean like changing your phone language?
Yeah.
Or watching movies without subtitles, that kind of thing?
Yes, all of that. Fill your life with the sounds and sights of English. Music, movies, TV shows definitely, books, articles. Changing your phone settings is a great small step.
Okay.
It's all about consistent exposure. You start to absorb the rhythm, the patterns, the intonation, almost subconsciously.
So you're training your ear and maybe your brain to just operate in English more naturally.
That's the idea. The more you immerse yourself, the less you'll automatically default to translating. You'll find English phrases just start popping into your head more readily when you want to say something. This immersion helps build up what you could call a mental library of English, ready to use phrases and structures.
A mental library. I like that. Like having resources right there ready to pull from when you need them. But that sounds like it takes time and, well, effort.
It definitely does. It's not overnight. But remember, even small, consistent bits of immersion add up. It's about building a new habit for your brain.
Okay. So thinking in English through immersion is huge. What other big hurdles do learners face when they actually try to, speak?
Another really significant one, it's the fear of making mistakes.
Ah, yes. The perfectionism trap.
Exactly. It can be paralyzing. People worry so much about saying something wrong or sounding silly that they just don't speak at all.
Yeah, I think everyone feels that sometimes, even outside language learning. That fear of judgment. So how do you push past that? How do you get started speaking even if you feel like you're going to mess up?
The absolute first thing is changing how you see mistakes. It's crucial. You have to internalize that mistakes are not just normal, they're essential. Everyone makes them. Native speakers, too. We stumble over words, use slightly off grammar sometimes.
Right. It's not failure, it's just how learning works.
Precisely. So instead of seeing them as something to be ashamed of, try to view them as feedback, as opportunities. Every time you make a mistake, it's a chance to notice something. Maybe improve your pronunciation on a certain sound, or understand a grammar point better, or learn a new word.
Okay, so it's about embracing the stumbles, learning from them, not letting them shut you down.
That's it. Now, okay, let's talk specific techniques. Things you can actively do to improve speaking fluency. Our sources mention several good ones. One that comes up a lot is shadowing.
Shadowing. I've heard of that. Can you break that down? What is it exactly and how does it help?
Sure. Shadowing is basically listening to a native speaker, maybe from a podcast like this or an audiobook, a movie clip, and you repeat what they're saying almost at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you're their shadow, vocally, following them as closely as you can.
So you're not just repeating the words after them, but trying to copy how they say it, the pronunciation, the rhythm, the ups and downs in their voice.
Exactly right. You're mimicking everything. Pronunciation, intonation, stress patterns, the overall pace. Think of it as a workout for your mouth and ears in English. It helps you get a feel for the natural flow of the language. You might even pick up new vocabulary or sentence structures without realizing it.
Okay.
The advice is usually to start small, maybe just a minute or two of audio. Really focus on matching the speaker. Then, as you get more comfortable, you can try longer chunks. Pay attention to how they link words, where the stress falls in a sentence, how their voice rises or falls. This active imitation really trains your production skills.
That sounds really practical. I can see how physically trying to match someone's speech would help tune your own. What's another technique the sources highlighted?
Another one, which might sound basic but is really powerful, is mastering simple, everyday phrases.
Like, hello, how are you, thank you, that kind of stuff.
Yes, exactly. Excuse me, sorry, could you repeat that? All those foundational bits of interaction.
But they seem so simple. Do they really make that much difference to overall fluency?
They absolutely do. Think about it. These are the building blocks of almost every conversation. When you can use these basic phrases automatically without thinking, it gives you a huge confidence boost. It makes starting and navigating simple interactions much smoother. Practice saying them out loud in different imaginary situations until they feel totally natural, completely effortless. Getting these down frees up your mental energy to focus on the more complex parts of what you want to say.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Having those reliable little phrases ready to go, like conversational anchors. What else? Any other actionable tips?
Another one, again simple but surprisingly effective. Record yourself speaking English.
Just talking to my phone.
Yep. Pick a topic you like, maybe summarize an article you read, or even just read something out loud. Then, and this is the important part, listen back to it.
Uh-oh. I'm not sure I'd like hearing myself.
It can be a bit cringy at first, but it's incredibly valuable. You'll notice things about your pronunciation, your rhythm, maybe hesitations you weren't aware of while you were speaking. It gives you a more objective perspective. You can hear where you maybe stumble or where your pronunciation could be clearer. Then you can focus your practice. Maybe work on specific sounds, or try speaking a bit slower or faster. Experiment.
It's like being your own coach, in a way, getting direct feedback you might miss otherwise. Now, we've been using this word fluency a lot. Can we define that a bit more clearly? What does fluency actually mean in language learning? Is it different from, say, accuracy?
That's a great question. Fluency, at its heart, is about being able to communicate your ideas smoothly, without too many unnatural pauses, without constantly struggling to find the right word. It's that feeling of ease and confidence when you express yourself, letting your thoughts flow naturally in English without overthinking every single grammar rule.
Okay.
And yes, it is different from accuracy. Accuracy is about being correct, using the right grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. Fluency is more about the flow. You can actually be quite fluent but still make occasional mistakes. The main thing is you can get your message across effectively and naturally.
So fluency is the smooth river, accuracy is the clear water, something like that.
That's a nice way to put it, yeah. Both are important, obviously. But fluency is often what learners are striving for when they say they want to speak better. It's a journey, too, not some final destination you reach. It's continuous improvement.
Right. It's not about zeroing mistakes. It's about comfortable communication. Okay. Now, shifting gears slightly, one source mentioned the brain science behind this. How our brains handle understanding versus speaking. Can you shed some light on that? What's happening neurologically?
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Basically, learning a new language physically changes your brain. It involves strengthening neural connections, building new pathways for processing, and crucially, producing that language. There's a specific region, Broca's area, that's heavily involved in speech production forming words, putting sentences together.
Okay.
Learning to speak a language means training that area specifically for the target language. So while understanding English uses comprehension pathways, it doesn't automatically fire up the production pathways in Broca's area needed for speaking.
Ah, so understanding and speaking use different, though connected, brain circuits.
Essentially, yes. It's like knowing the theory of how to swim versus actually having the muscle coordination and pathways built to do it. You need specific practice for the doing part.
That really clarifies why understanding doesn't just magically translate into speaking ability. You need to practice the speaking part itself to build those specific neural connections. And we talked about fear earlier, those mental blocks. What does psychology tell us about these barriers?
Well, those mental barriers, the fear of judgment, the anxiety about mistakes, general lack of confidence, they're incredibly powerful. Often these fears get amplified in our own heads. We imagine the worst-case scenario. This increases self-consciousness and makes us clam up.
So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
It can, yeah. The key is recognizing these feelings are normal, but then actively working to shift that mindset. It involves being kinder to yourself. Patience is crucial. Accepting mistakes is part of the deal. And really celebrating the small wins every time you manage to express something, that's progress. Building resilience, being compassionate with yourself. These are skills just as important as vocabulary. Learn from setbacks, definitely, but don't let them derail you.
It sounds like giving yourself permission to be imperfect is really fundamental, to see every attempt as practice, not a performance.
Exactly. And once you're getting comfortable with those basics, the shadowing, the everyday phrases, there are other techniques you can layer on, like chunking.
Chunking, what's that?
Chunking is basically breaking down language into smaller, meaningful groups of words, or chunks. Instead of trying to construct a long, complex sentence all at once in your head, which could be really demanding.
Yeah, overwhelming.
You focus on mastering smaller units, common phrases, collocations, sentence starters. So, for example, instead of building, excuse me, could you please tell me where the nearest post office is? From scratch every time. You might practice chunks like, excuse me, could you please tell me? And where the nearest is.
Yeah.
You learn these units.
Ah, I see. So you learn common word combinations that go together.
Exactly. You practice these chunks until they become automatic. Then speaking becomes more like assembling these prefabricated pieces rather than building everything from individual bricks. It reduces the cognitive load, makes speech flow more smoothly.
Like having ready-made Lego blocks instead of just loose bricks. That makes sense. And you mentioned revisiting shadowing. How can people take that technique further?
Right. As you get better, you can make shadowing more challenging and analytical. Try using material that's just slightly above your current level, enough to stretch you, but not so hard. It's just frustrating. Apply chunking here, too. Don't try to shadow long paragraphs right away. Break it down. Focus on mastering a sentence or two at a time. And definitely keep recording yourself shadowing. Then listen back and compare yourself critically to the original speaker. Where are the differences in rhythm, intonation, specific sounds? It becomes a more focused diagnostic tool.
So using it more deliberately to pinpoint areas for improvement as you advance? Okay, these practice techniques are great, but people need real-world practice too, right?
Yeah.
How can learners create opportunities to actually use English, especially if they aren't living abroad?
That's such a critical piece of the puzzle. You need to find ways to make speaking a part of your life. Think about your hobbies. Could you join a local club or group where English might be used, even occasionally? A book club reading English books, a film group, maybe even online gaming.
Good idea, using your interests.
And the online world offers so much now. Language exchange apps are fantastic. Tandem, Hello Talk. Places where you can find partners to practice with. You help them with your language, they help you with English.
Mutual practice.
Exactly. Look for online conversation groups, virtual language cafes. Some platforms offer informal group chats. Or consider finding an online tutor, even just for conversation practice. The main thing is, start speaking early, often, even if it's just simple sentences. Don't wait until you feel ready, because that day might never come. Every interaction helps build confidence and skill.
Right. Don't wait for perfection, just dive in. Use the language, however imperfectly at first.
Precisely. And that brings us back, really, to mindset. It underpins everything. How you think about learning English hugely impacts your progress. How you handle challenges, how you view mistakes, what keeps you motivated.
So managing your own psychology is key.
Absolutely. Set realistic goals. What does fluency actually mean for you? Why are you learning? Align your expectations with your personal motivations. And focus on the small wins. Acknowledge your progress. Maybe you understood a joke. Maybe you asked for directions successfully. Celebrate that. Cultivating that growth mindset, the belief you can improve with effort, is so important. It fuels you through the tough spots.
And resilience, too, I imagine. It can get frustrating.
Definitely. Resilience is vital, and finding a community helps build that. Connect with other learners, online or offline. Sharing struggles and successes makes a huge difference. And one last thing on mindset. Gratitude. It sounds a bit soft, maybe, but consciously appreciating the opportunity to learn, the resources you have, the cultures you can connect with, it can genuinely shift your perspective and make the whole process more positive.
So it's this whole package. The techniques, the practice opportunities, the community, and that positive, resilient mindset.
That's really the core of it, yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's quickly recap the main strategies we've covered. We talked about really trying to think in English, using immersion to help build that mental library, getting over that fear of mistakes, seeing them as learning chances, using practical techniques like shadowing, mimicking native speakers, mastering those simple, everyday phrases for confidence, recording yourself to hear how you actually sound, using chunking to break down language, and crucially, actively creating real chances to speak online or offline. Plus, we touched on the brain science and the huge role of mindset, resilience, community, and even gratitude.
That's a great summary. And for an actual next step for everyone listening, just pick one of those techniques, whichever one resonated most with you today, and commit to trying it out regularly, even just for 5 or 10 minutes a day. That consistent, focused practice, that's what really builds skill over time.
Absolutely. Remember, everyone, speaking English is a skill. Like any skill, it gets better with practice, with dedication, and, importantly, with a positive approach. Try to embrace the challenges, learn from the errors, and really pat yourself on the back for every step forward you take. Enjoy the process. It's an amazing journey.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. What would happen if you consciously shifted your focus just a little bit each day, away from only understanding English and more towards actively expressing yourself in English, even in small ways? How might that simple shift start to change your experience and build your confidence? What's one tiny speaking action you could commit to trying today?
Building directly upon the foundational principle of immersion, our second highly effective strategy is to actively cultivate the habit of thinking in simple, everyday English throughout the course of your day. You don't need to immediately engage in complex philosophical debates or intricate hypothetical scenarios within the confines of your own mind. Instead, begin with the fundamental practice of internally narrating your routine daily activities in English. As you are preparing your morning coffee, consciously think to yourself, I am making coffee, the water is boiling, I am adding milk. When your gaze falls upon an interesting object or a noteworthy event, make a deliberate effort to formulate simple English sentences to describe it. That car driving by is a vibrant shade of blue. The flowers in the garden are exceptionally beautiful today. This seemingly simple internal monologue, the consistent practice of forming basic English sentences automatically without the intermediary mental step of translating from your native tongue, is a powerful way to establish a direct neural pathway between your thoughts and their English expression. Introducing a more active, engaging, and vocal technique, emphasizing the kinesthetic element. Our third highly recommended technique involves actively engaging in the practice of speaking English, even if your initial audience is solely yourself. Find a quiet and comfortable space where you feel at ease and uninhibited, and then consciously begin to describe the objects and your immediate surroundings in English. Select a particular object that catches your eye and mentally, or even aloud, list all the English vocabulary you currently possess to characterize it, its specific color, its overall shape, its relative size, its tactile texture, its primary function. You can also actively practice summarizing short articles you've recently read in English, or briefly recounting the plot of a video you've watched in English. The physical act of vocalizing the English words and constructing coherent sentences helps to solidify the crucial connection between your internal thoughts and their corresponding English linguistic expression, engaging both your auditory and kinesthetic senses in the learning process. Moving towards a more structured and visually reinforced learning approach, emphasizing environmental cues. Strategy number 4 introduces a practical and visually reinforced method, actively labeling your immediate environment with English words. Obtain a set of sticky notes or small labels and diligently write down the English names for the common objects that populate your home and your workplace. Table, chair, window, door, computer, lamp. Strategically place these labels on the corresponding objects. Then, every time your gaze falls upon one of these labeled items, consciously make a direct and immediate association between the physical object itself and the written English word, actively bypassing the habitual need to first recall the word in your native language and then translate it. This seemingly simple yet remarkably effective technique is a powerful way to gradually build your everyday English vocabulary and consistently reinforce the direct linkage between concepts and their English equivalents within your cognitive framework. Introducing a technique focused on active reading and contextual vocabulary acquisition, emphasizing deeper understanding. Our 5th highly valuable strategy involves cultivating a habit of regular and engaged reading in English, coupled with a proactive approach to learning new vocabulary within its natural context. When you inevitably encounter an unfamiliar word during your reading sessions, resist the immediate temptation to simply memorize its definition in your native language in isolation. Instead, actively strive to infer its meaning from the surrounding sentences and the broader context of the passage. Subsequently, take the extra step to look up its English definition in an English dictionary, and crucially, pay close attention to the example sentences provided. Following this, make a conscious and deliberate effort to actively incorporate that newly acquired word into your own internal English thoughts and your spoken or written English sentences throughout the remainder of your day. This active engagement with vocabulary and context fosters a deeper and more nuanced understanding of its meaning and usage, directly linking the new word to English concepts rather than relying on translation. Shifting the focus towards conscious, cognitive effort and breaking ingrained linguistic habits, highlighting a key challenge. Strategy number 6 tackles one of the most significant yet challenging aspects of training your brain to think in English, consciously and persistently striving to avoid the ingrained habit of mentally translating. This is arguably one of the most deeply rooted linguistic habits to break, particularly for learners who have relied on translation as a primary learning tool for an extended period. However, consciously minimizing and eventually eliminating this intermediary step is absolutely crucial for achieving genuine fluency and direct English thinking. When you hear someone speaking in English, or when you formulate a thought that you wish to express in English, make a deliberate and focused effort to directly access the English meaning and the associated concepts, rather than first formulating the thought in your native language and then engaging in the often slower and less efficient process of translation. If you find yourself momentarily stuck on a particular word or phrase, actively try to utilize other English words and expressions that you already know to describe the concept or convey your intended meaning, effectively circumventing the need to revert to your native language for assistance, introducing a technique designed to make the learning process more interactive and communicative, emphasizing real-time application. Our 7th highly effective technique involves actively and regularly engaging in real-time English conversations. Seek out opportunities to connect with language exchange partners, actively participate in online English speaking groups or forums, or even make a conscious effort to verbalize your thoughts and feelings in English to yourself in a private setting. The more frequently you actively utilize English in dynamic, real-time communication scenarios, the more your brain will be compelled to think and respond spontaneously and directly in English, without the cognitive lag associated with mental. Translation: it is within the context of live interaction that you will truly begin to witness the tangible shift from translating to genuine English thinking taking place within your cognitive processes. And finally, strategy number 9 underscores the paramount importance of cultivating patience and maintaining unwavering persistence throughout this transformative journey. Training your brain to consistently think in English is not an overnight endeavor. It requires sustained effort, consistent practice, and a significant investment of time. It is absolutely crucial not to become discouraged or disheartened if you do not observe immediate and dramatic results. Continue to diligently implement these techniques on a regular basis, and gradually, often subtly at first, you will begin to notice that thinking in English becomes an increasingly natural, automatic, and less cognitively demanding process. Remember to acknowledge and celebrate your progress along the way, no matter how small the individual steps may seem.